what is leadership for you?
Yes. And this is very specific towards my bent on what I teach, because you could give many definitions. But for me, a great leadership is controlling what you control to influence what you don't towards a meaningful goal. So controlling what you control towards influencing what you don't, with the aim at a meaningful goal, something that is meaningful. And I say that because I believe there are three players. Leadership can be very complex emotionally, and it is, but it's also very simple. To me, there are three players in the game of performance and in the game of relationship. So for you and I to consider ourselves, the first player is us, you. And then the second player is them, the people around you, your coworkers, your customers, your clients, your family, your friends, your arch enemies, all of those people. And then there's the environment, which can be a physical environment of working from home or working in an office, but it can be culture, it can be values, it can be a number of things. And I like to remind people that the person that they control the least, especially for leaders, but this is for personal leadership too. This is relationship stuff. The person you control the least, the player you control the least, is them. And as leaders, you're going to get burned if you try.
I agree with you on that.
And so I think great leadership controls what you can, which is ourselves to some extent, and the environment we create, which is why I love offering leaders a blueprint to building environments that influence behavior. So Marilyn, your behaviors today are very much influenced by your past. And so whether it's your culture, your faith, your schooling, your work experiences, your successes, any failures, any traumatic experiences, they have all brought you to today where you will automatically act in a certain way in any given situation based on what you have learned is the right thing to do. So my point to leaders is this, is that if our past environments molded our behaviors today, if we just have the audacity to see something different 2 to 3 to 4 years down the road, then instead of trying to change people, the environment you build today will be your biggest friend and have the biggest influence in realizing that behavioral change, because environments are powerful. And I'll make this one last point because we're both teachers. The reason I developed my own curriculum and the reason I'm passionate about the environment is because, for example, in teaching across North America, there are many workshops where, like you'll get students that are high-fiving you and it's like, thank you, David. And I know these 1, 2, 3 things that need to change. And for so many of them, I would connect with them 2 months later and ask them what really changed. And so often the answer was nothing. And I recognized the power of the environment they went back to either inspire their inspiration and have it turn into meaningful change, or to immediately almost squash it and kill it. And so that's my passion for helping leaders build environments that influence behavior in people.
So what if you were to name just the top three problems that they normally face, what would it be?
Okay, so thank you for that question. Here are my three: identity, certainty, and community. So identity, certainty, and community. Identity, knowing who you are, or being on a path towards fully discovering who you are. Here's the issue, and we've kind of touched on it already in the power of authenticity. Every authenticity has every organization has an authenticity in terms of its culture. And that will appeal to certain customers and not appeal to others. It'll appeal to certain employees and not appeal to others. My big thing is shout out so loudly who you are that your fans find you and your haters stay away. And so from a sales perspective, it means that you don't spend money trying to get customers that were not meant to be yours and that will be a high cost of serving because they're never satisfied. And from an employee perspective, It's like, don't be ashamed of your culture. I know that your company's not perfect. Can you just begin to describe in several ways what it is, so that people that do appreciate it, because we all appreciate different things in this wonderful wide world of diversity, they find you. And when they come and they get what they expected, they're happy, and it's so good. And there is an event out in Banff. One of my friends, Ryan Gill, he's an up-and-coming world leader, and it's called The Gathering, and they bring in the biggest marketing brands. And Airbnb came. And what I loved about how they defined their identity is they didn't do it from the boardroom down. They went out to their hosts. So they're places that were listed on Airbnb, and they asked them to describe who they were and what they were, and looked for commonalities. And then they went to their employees, and they asked them to describe who they felt that they were, and that's how they developed their identity. That's how they marketed to customers. And the exact line, it's something like home away from home, or their tagline had to do with having a home away from home. And that was what people felt. That's what employees felt. That's what the people who rented out their places felt they were giving to someone else. And because it was authentic, it stuck, and a huge success story. Mm-hmm. And I think if you don't do that, the danger is you try to be someone you're not, or you try to be someone, or you try to be everything to everyone. And neither of those paths is a great success path. So I think every leader should spend some time with their teams and with their clients, truly understanding, who am I? Because that'll better define your customer base from a sales and revenue perspective, and it's going to really help recruiting and retention. Mm-hmm. On that side. And so then certainty. Certainty in our lives on a personal basis gives us focus. It gives us peace. It gives us confidence. It gives us energy. And on a corporate basis, there was a research study done about 10 years ago, but I believe it would still be relevant because I don't think we've changed that much as humans. Mm-hmm. But it said that 9 out of 10 times non-performance in a company has nothing to do with the person not being able to do the job. It had nothing to do with their aptitude. It had everything to do with fully and completely understanding what was asked of them.
Wow. Okay.
And so for leaders, that's huge. And so when we talk about leaders, in Stephen Covey's 4 quadrants of where you spend your day, and quadrant number 1 being urgent and important, that can burn you out. And urgency, emotional urgency, happens when you don't get what you expect. And so I spend a lot of time coaching leaders on setting expectations with clarity. Because when people are certain what they can do each day, there's a focus and an energy, like I said, that comes about that is going to quadruple your results. Not just increase your results slightly, it's exponentially. When certainty is in place, good things happen. When we are uncertain, it affects relationships, it affects productivity, and it is preventable. So it's another passion of mine. And then community. So, in a lot of organizations, I find the environment to be this, that at the ground level, they will look at the management level above them, and they will wait for them to come up with programs to solve some of the issues at their level. And a part of that is that level's job, but there are so many cases and areas where I find that if they just acted as a community, they wouldn't need a program from above. So let me give you this example for the listeners to kind of make it a little bit more relevant. Last week, we talked about the power of community, and I asked them for stories about where community rallied. And they saw community pitch in and help. And there were a number of stories, whether people lost their homes to a fire, or there were floods in an area, or people where health was taken away, and so their finances, income stream was taken away, and they were in dire circumstances. When the community comes in, usually, here's the thing, with government, if government intervenes at that next level of leadership has to come in, it requires a budget, it requires discussion and approval, it requires time, it requires bureaucracy, and usually our taxes go up. When community gets involved, I mean, the stories were incredible where these people would just bring of what they had. The resources were already there. It built relationships because when you come together to help someone, there's no feeling like it. It builds team. And so we were passionate last week about exploring for some of the things they were getting frustrated waiting for from upper leadership, where community with existing resources could actually come in and rally and actually connect and build these tight weaves between the communities within the organization. And so identity, certainty, community, they're a big part of what I love to coach.
What would you believe then would be the leadership capabilities or skills that you must have in this next normal to continue to lead effectively?
Yeah, I think as so much is changing, I think the number one skill is questions, asking questions. It is so counterintuitive. So, for example, if you're going to discover what's around the corner with this pace of change and technology changing and driving so much change around us, it's good to engage your community in terms of what they see. And the only way we do that is through questions. And I'll give you this one example. A lot of times on performance reviews, a manager or a leader will be with their employee and they'll have their laptop and they'll show them their results and say, this was what is expected. Here's what I see that you did. And you get an A+, Marilyn. Congratulations. And a 2% bonus at the end of the year. And David, you failed. And you get an F on your test. And that's what you do. You're losing out. You're losing out. And then at the end of all of that, you ask if they have any questions, but that environment is so intense and so pressurized that they're not going to ask you the questions or voice any dissent that they might have had. A leader does this. He gives them the laptop and says, tell me how you think you did. How did you do? And listen to them as they walk you through what they did compared to what they were supposed to do. And that's where you're going to get insights and data around where your teams are really at. And you should celebrate it with people. You're going to find out their uncertainties, their misperceptions, their misconceptions, that all of those things would have been hidden had you just talked at them. A friend of mine, Randy Johnson, he's a psychologist. He wrote the book, Could Questions Be the Answer? And it just released last year. And absolutely. So another question that is I think, an amazing question to ask. You don't control anyone. When you're passionately curious about someone, they may not be doing what you want them to do as your employee, but they may be resistant and stubborn. And so my encouragement is just ask what they think and listen, and then ask this question: how's that working for you? And then all of a sudden, they have to respond to that and admit that it's not. And when they come to that realization, then all of a sudden great developmental conversations and plans can take place. Tell someone they need help, and you're in for a fight. And so I think the number one skill for leaders in the coming period, especially with uncertainty, is asking questions. And the number two is community building. So much like Dominic did earlier, as you see common interests, link people inside your organization, outside your organization, customers, because it's a small world now. We've got this global framework. We can have this conversation across from Singapore to Calgary, and it's easy. And those relationships will do more for you long-term than you could ever realize. And actually, number three, I will add a third one, as I was just talking. We chatted about last week. My question to the leaders was this: do you view every relationship as long-term or short-term? And for these leaders, they had a lot of seasonal workers. and which meant that they worked for them in the summer, and then they would leave to go back to school or leave to go back wherever. And I said, a long-term view of a relationship is being passionately curious about who they are, even though they may only spend 3 months with you, because you never know down the road where, when, how that taking an interest will pay off. And we have a personal example. A friend of ours, she is, she's now in her 60s. She has a son. And in Singapore, I would imagine it's the same as it is in Canada. For a group of friends, there's always that one house they go to. Well, that was her house. So her boy brought his friends to their house. And especially for this one boy, she was his confidant. He was struggling with finding who he was, listened really well, took an interest. Fast forward 4 decades, lost touch, went off, did his thing, education, career, really hadn't touched base a whole lot. 2 years ago, she had a diagnosis of a tumor on her brain, and the symptom was losing her eyesight. And when she went into our local hospital to have some testing done, her doctor had arranged for testing. She walked out of the testing room and started walking down the hallway. And lo and behold, who walks the other way but this teenager, now a grown man? And he was the head of specialty at that hospital. And he was like, "Hope, how are you?" And hugged her. "And what's going on? And why are you here?" And all of a sudden she explained, and he says, "Well, who have they got you? Who's your team?" And so she showed him, and he said, "That's the wrong team. Give me 1 day." And she got the help that she needed. When we take a long-term view to relationships, corporately and personally, by being passionately interested in people, you never know when, you never know how. For the company that I trained last week, it was true that 10 years later, someone who had a great experience as a seasonal employee donated $1 million to one of their causes because that relationship was there.